Recently, I put a ton of time into the suspension design and just geometry of the Speed 6 that I have, and I figured this car deserves more time and just more setup in general. So in this video, I pretty much just go over resetting up the car, sort of trying to get things figured out and just make it faster if possible, but really try out some new things and see if I like it. First thing I did was adjust the caster in the front to match, adjust bump steer as well, and then I did a bunch of stuff in the rear end involving stiffer spring rates, stiffer sway bars, and different suspension geometry. These are how you adjust caster on these older SPL arms. Camber is actually just from these shims, so it's actually pretty nice. These shims will stay camber. Like I know the chassis is square, so as long as everything on both sides matches, then my camber and toe and caster should all match. So pretty much I measured the distance between this end and the end of the arm here. I think it's 1/8 inch adds a degree of caster. I forgot exactly what SPL says, but I know this car is running about 11 degrees of caster at the moment, and I just want to match them side to side. That way I know the car is dialed. It's not quite the most exact thing in the world, but you can see there's about 1 1/8 inches where the sort of rounded head of this heim joint starts from the flat aluminum section here. I'll go ahead and show you guys the other side now. Here it is much brighter, but you can see it's about 1 1/16. So it's not a huge difference. I'll probably just give this one turn and it should be good. But I'm also going to try and pull out the alignment sheet and see what the alignment sheet shows me right now. Here's how simple this caster adjustment is. Literally just loosen up this jam nut here. I'll just go ahead and spin this one full turn in, tighten this down, and then remeasure it. But that should be enough to match both sides of the car. Another thing I'm going to do, since I'm putting in a way stiffer rear bar, is I'm going to stiffen up the front bar just to hope the car bounces out a little better. I'd rather not like just have it undrivable because it's way too stiff on one end. Somehow these old white line end links seem to work just fine, so we'll just go ahead and throw these guys back in. So my camera's charging, but I still want to show you guys something pretty interesting. The Z's are pretty cool. The way they're designed really well suspension-wise. Pretty under-talked topic, but my car is plenty low, much lower than factory. And you could see it gives the illusion the roll center is pretty bad because this arm kicks up right here, but really the ball joint is here in the knuckles. So that's about where the sort of steering knuckle pivots around is here. And you can see it's pretty much a straight line, nearly parallel with the ground from the inner point where the arm will rotate, which is that spherical bearing in there, and our ball joint. I'm doing this to visualize the bump steer. After working on the Speed 6 so much and figuring out that bump steer characteristic, I realized I never really put too much time into this car, which honestly deserves more attention because this is the race car. Also want to show you guys another thing. I'm not sure I'll even need to adjust that much because of the way my caster is adjusted at the upper arms there. And this whole spindle will pivot backwards to adjust the caster. What this also means, the way the lower arms are all laid out, they're laid out in a line. So it goes control arm here, curved control arm here, and then tie rod way back here. You can kind of see it there, but you might be able to get a better idea like this. This is our main control arm, that's our pivot arm, and that's our tie rod. So what this means is those are also flat. The more you pivot backwards, it'll twist those down, which will automatically correct the bump steer while adding the caster to the car. When I threw this on, I didn't actually have adjustable upper arms. I think I just threw this in with a smaller spacer, figuring the car was lowered and that should get the angles right. Honestly, the car doesn't drive too bad, but I'm just wondering if I can make it even better, so I am going through it again. Like I said, cool design once you take advantage of it and kind of learn how it all works and goes together. So looking here, we can get an idea. There's our straight line, of course. That blue tape is pretty much, like I said, the two pivot points inside the subframe and out the knuckle. And you can see it's nearly parallel while the tie rod end has a slight angle upwards. It's not really huge at all. But I am thinking, just for the case of testing the car and just seeing what works and what doesn't, I'm gonna try and add another small spacer to put that angle down a little farther, and I'll have to get it all aligned and then go drive it and see what it works. But the good thing is, after doing that, once the rest of the car's aligned, all I have to do is mess with tie rods to get the toe correct again, and then it's easy to just swap spacers and align the front end and see how I feel. Went ahead and grabbed this smaller spacer here. You can see it's pretty thin compared to what these are. That's the one they come with. So this is about half the length. Just give us a little bit more angle. Let's go ahead and loosen up this 24 at the bottom, and then drop all these down, put a new spacer arrangement in, and be good. My next change to the setup of this car comes at the back under here. The sway bar I currently have in the rear of this car is a Nismo sway bar. This is actually 5 pounds lighter in terms of torsional rigidity than the OEM sway bar. It's about a 375 pound per inch sway bar, the stock one being 380. This worked out great for the setup the way I had it before. The front sway bar was a little softer. It was kind of on a softer setup to try and maximize mechanical grip, but I'm gonna go ahead and try something different, maybe stiffen up the chassis a little bit. Because my car has so much caster, I'm thinking it weight jacks so much, it loads the rear end up too much with the amount of caster it has. This is sort of a recipe for a lot of guys, and it worked great until I added a lot of caster and put in a welded, not a welded diff, but a Tomei LSD. And considering my car isn't the normal setup anymore with the amount of caster it has and just the diff being as aggressive as it is, why try and follow a normal setup? So for that, I have this Hotchkiss rear sway bar, which I've actually had for a really long time, and I threw in the car originally, but it was too unstable in entry on corners, so I didn't really like it too much. Putting in the stock sway bar and then eventually the Nismo sway bar made it a lot better. So I'm gonna go and throw this back in as an attempt to sort of fix my understeer bias, because the car has a pretty heavy understeer bias mid-corner and on entry. And at this point, I'm kind of just over it. I'd rather the car sort of do what I ask it to. Forgot to mention the Hotchkiss sway bar. On its softest setting, it claims to be a 525 pound per inch bar, so it's gonna go up almost double, which is quite a lot. So I'm a little worried about it. I feel like it might be too big of a jump, but that's why I also said I could swap out the rear springs, and that's also why I've sort of evened out the car. So, a little difficult to see, but there you can see Nismo sway bar. This is now out of the car. It is much thinner. Here I have a leftover skid plate that actually got super destroyed when I crashed the Z because of ABS issues, but pretty much I kept it around for use in material. This is all 1/8 inch thick aluminum, and I think 1/8 inch might be just enough to actually clear the diff mount to sway bar clearances. So I'm just going to mark out some measurements here, cut a little strip out of this, drill some holes to make my own sway bar spacers. Okay, now real simple. I'll just lay the sway bar bracket over and we will just start drilling in some holes. Alright, so I ended up making 2 more of those shims. Turns out 1 wasn't enough, so this is about a 1/4 inch, just under a 1/4 inch of spacer under the sway bar. And you can see now, it clears, no issues. Listen. Doesn't hit anything, it just barely clears the bushing, which is awesome. Now we'll actually be able to get this thing on and know it won't bind at any position in the suspension. These are rear traction arms. If you guys are unfamiliar with my car specifically, I have 370Z axles. And as a part of that, I also have 370Z upper arms, which is 5 millimeters longer per side. So I have adjustable toe and camber arms, which allowed me to correct the suspension without doing 370Z arms here. But I still have the stock 350Z traction arm. So pretty much by pushing out the lower and the top, it like moved the whole wheel forward. You can imagine it'll push it out this way, but that arm, since it's the same length, will kind of pivot. So these are adjustable so I can correct the length. I think I'll just space them out about 5 millimeter. You can also use these to adjust your toe curves. Not sure how it's gonna affect the car right now, but I figured pick them up, have something adjustable, and then make the whole rear of the car spherical, because all of it is spherical except for the tension arm bushing here. So now it's all gonna be Heim jointed and good. So with the traction arm out, you can actually get a pretty good look at what it does. This is towards the rear of the car, and then towards the front, you'll see it'll completely change the camber and the toe. So having it adjusted farther out will change the geometry heavily. Whether it's for the good or the worse, we will find out. And just like that, we now have the ISR traction arms thrown in there. I went ahead and just eyeballed a quick alignment. That way it's a little easier on me doing the real alignment. I don't know if you can see them in there. Hard to see the screen right now, but they are indeed in there. And like I said, I just eyeballed the toe to get it sort of close to where I wanted it. Throwing these in really threw off toe. So there's that. And it looks like it pulled a camber out a bit, which is nice, but I think I'll have to add some more camber back in to clear the quarters. But this side barely clears the quarter. I'll put in a video right now. It's kind of insane. Alright, ever since I put in the 370Z rear arms, I've had a pretty crazy understeer with this car, and I always just thought it was from the extra track width. This is going to be great information for all you Z guys, if any of you guys are watching this. I got to thinking last night, there is a length difference, and the sway bar mounts differently, even though it uses the same factory end lengths and all that, but this is a different style bracket to a 350 arm. So I was wondering, I wonder if the sway bar is mounted farther inboard and that's what's causing it, because effectively the sway bar would have less effectiveness on the wheel because the wheel rate would be different. Took some measurements, turned out that actually is the case. But the more important measurement is from here to the ball joint. You can see, we'll line it up pretty much the center of that hole. It's about 6 inches. to the center of the ball joint. That's going to be a really important measurement. That's actually from pretty much where the knuckle rides and the actual sway bar. Here on the 370Z arm, you can see I've made a mark where pretty much the end link bolts straight up to that to the arm there, so we can easily measure from that line to the ball joint. And what you'll see is there's actually a massive difference in length. This is closer to 7.5 inches or 8 inches from the center of the sway bar to out here, which is a nearly 2-inch difference in the actual leverage the wheel has on the sway bar, which would make a lot of sense why this rear end felt way softer even with adding the 7K springs. It's because these 370Z arms push the wheel farther out, but they leave the sway bar essentially in the stock location. So what this ends up doing is it gives the wheel more leverage to then pry on the sway bar and make it feel softer. I lifted all this up because I was thinking about putting in the 5K rear springs, but I think with this new information, I will leave the 7Ks and we will figure out how it feels, and I'll just bring the 5Ks with me to the track. If they feel bad, I'll just swap them there. But so far, I'm very interested to see how this will work out with now the stiffer sway bar. And with that, here we are. I've brought the Z out to some California back roads to go ahead and test out all the changes I made. I made quite a bit of changes, which is kind of stupid because I made like 5 changes and I don't know which one made the most difference. So I guess we'll go ahead and see. I'll go ahead and touch on what I did again. Tried to match the caster, ended up actually matching pretty well. The car now drives straight, which is perfect. And I also adjusted the bump steer a little farther down. We're going to see if that sort of works out. It still feels a little bump steery, but I haven't really actually driven it yet. But cruising, the car does feel much better. It feels much more tame and like not as twitchy in terms of front and rear balance, which is obviously a great thing. Also in the rear, I did the ISR tension arms, which moved the wheel back a little bit more. And I also took out some camber. Now it's a little less camber. Turns out it will clear the quarters even with the 370Z uppers. More notably, I put in the Hotchkiss rear sway bar, which is far stiffer than the Nismo bar. And what else? The car did raise a little bit just by the nature of lowering the camber number in the rear. Raised up the rear just a tad. I'm a little less nervous for the sway bar difference, just seeing as how the sway bar pickup point on the 370 arms is much farther in. Like I said, it does have less of a effect on the actual wheel because the spring essentially is mounted further in as well. And I also did stiffen up the front sway bar, so hopefully the car's not super bad or super rear sort of tail happy. There's only one way to find out. Also put a stock bumper on it. It's not perfect. My friend gives me for free. This is all missing. I have it duct taped so it doesn't look as bad, but I definitely do like the stock bumper far more. This thing looks mean from the front when the wheels are straight because the wheels barely come out. You just see the NTO ones poking out the front. It looks sweet, especially from this angle here. Take a look at that. That is so good. This thing looks mean right now. Honestly loving it. So anyways, I'm gonna go and set up the camera and we're gonna go and drive this thing and just get a feel for it.
Mainly like right now, the car feels way more tame. Like it pulls a little bit because there's zero toe and road conditions, but it's pretty good.
Yes, we have more talking. For those of you that actually want to learn something and are paying attention to this, I want to try and help out as much as I can. So I'm going to go ahead and just explain why I'm doing things to the car and what things I am doing. Like I said, the car currently has a 13K front and a 7K rear spring rate. Now, these coilovers, when I bought them, they are Feel 441 Pluses. They had a 12K rate in the front and a 5K rear. These cars essentially have a 2-to-1 motion ratio in terms of wheel to coilover travel in the front, and essentially a 1-to-1 in the rear once you go true coil setup. 1-to-1 ratio in the rear to the 2-to-1 in the front, it would equal out to like a 12K, 10K with the stock spring rate. Now I have a 13K front, which would equal 13K, but the rear at the 7K would equal 14K, which is a little stiffer than the front. And this car has a front-heavy weight balance, so you would want a slightly softer spring in the rear to sort of balance out the weight. Factory, these cars are like a 53-47 weight balance. It's probably a little similar to that now, but maybe a little worse with all the weight removed. It's probably like a 54-46 or somewhere like that. So my point being is the rear should be softer. Now, the only springs I have for the rear are 7K and 5K. I think I'm going to try to end up finding a pair of 6Ks and then running those in the rear, at least trying them. So I'm probably going to actually order those today to try and get this figured out, because the rear did feel a little twitchy. It's not really what I'd liked. Obviously, what I drove wasn't ideal because a lot of the tracks I go to are more high-speed sweepers with some small corners. And the small corners are fine because you could deal with that. It's much lower speed. It's not as sketchy. I'd rather set my car up for the high-speed stuff and then have it work for the low-speed stuff and kind of just find a balance. But all I really tested was low-speed, tight corners today, which is an issue. I think the bump steer could be dialed out a little bit more, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave that for now, and we'll touch on that later. But the rear, I might even pull the tension rods in, because by pulling it in, it puts the angle of the tow arm down, which should help out with dynamic tow. It should tow out a little less. Right now, I believe it might be towing out when the car compresses because the arm is already angled up, so it's kind of pulling the hub inwards whenever the car compresses, which isn't great. So I might try and look into that, but mainly I want to try spring rates and then maybe adding in a bit more camber again, and possibly lowering it. Lowering the car would also make the rear a little less tail happy. Adding rake will make the car rotate, and as you see right now, it has good fitment. But the way I had it before, the tire was pretty much flush to the fender, and it didn't have any gap here. So it looks even now because the front height matches the rear height, but the car might still be a little rotaty because of that, or it could even be because of the stiff springs and sway bars. So I'm going to try and find 6K rear springs, and we're going to see how that feels. Worst case, go back to 5K, and really worst case, I might have to disconnect both sway bars to try and get the car figured out with just springs, and then adding in sway bars to dial in the sort of body roll bias front to rear.